ever been through it like stormy night, thunder, lightning, really strong rain, wind? We were camping once, and that's what it was all night long. And it's a little scary, and you wonder, is this ever going to end? You know, and can't sleep. Some people, I guess, can sleep through storms or whatever, but I can't when I'm in a tent. But then what's very interesting is that morning breaks, the sun comes out, the sky is clear, and you realize you made it. Yeah, it was hard, but that's what Habakkuk has been feeling as we go through the book of Habakkuk. He's been talking to God. Remember, the book is a conversation between two people, the prophet and the Lord. And he's asked a couple questions. He's gotten some answers he didn't like. And he finally just resolves himself to just sit and listen. And whatever the Lord's going to bring, that's what he's going to deal with. Now, remember, in his questioning of the Lord, he's upset with his own people wandering away from what God would have them to do, the idolatry, their immorality, their just hard-heartedness towards anything to do with the Lord and his temple, anything like that. And the God's going to bring the Chaldeans, right? He's going to bring the Chaldeans in to punish them. And Habakkuk's like, wait, I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that. And God's like, yeah, but you know what? I'll take care of the Chaldeans afterwards, which goes along with some of our themes of the book, if you remember. Iniquity does not triumph, and God does not overlook sin. So even though he's using the Chaldeans to punish his children, they are not going to escape punishment themselves. And that was shown in chapter 2. But we're going to be looking at chapter 3 today and just finishing out the book, because remember, this is a book that starts with a sob and ends with a song. It starts with a dialogue and ends with a psalm or praise. It's a very unique book in and of itself. So the first thing we're going to see in chapter 3 is Habakkuk prays for mercy, and that's in verses 1 and 2. It starts out, it says, a prayer of Habakkuk, the prophet, concerning erring ones. O Jehovah, I have heard your report. I am afraid. O Jehovah, give new life to your work in the midst of years. In the midst of years, make known. In wrath, remember mercy. So he begins to pray after hearing everything that's been said. And he says, I've heard your report, and I'm afraid. I know what's coming. I know what's going to be happening. And he didn't know if he was going to lose his life when the Chaldeans attacked or not. He didn't know, or whoever would come after that. But remember your work in the midst of years. Remember, the Lord doesn't forget his people. He doesn't forget his children. But there are times that they need correction. And it seems like he's forgotten. Well, no, he hasn't forgotten. And so I love the end of verse 2 where it says, in wrath, remember mercy. Now, a cool way to remember the difference between grace and mercy is grace. If you want to use an acronym, it's God's riches at Christ's expense. If you don't want to use that, you could also say it's receiving what you don't deserve. That's what grace is. Now, mercy is like the flip of that. It is not receiving what you do deserve. And so, correct word being used here, in wrath, remember mercy. They are being punished, but don't take it too far. Don't wipe out your people. Remember mercy. Please, don't punish us to the max. And that's what he's crying out for. And so you begin to see that as you read maybe the book of Daniel and see Babylon came in, and then the Medes and the Persians, Greeks, Romans, right? You go through the history of things. And you begin to see how Israel was treated by the nations around them in the Lord's correction of them. So we see that he prays for mercy, but then we see his presence of majesty. And this is kind of cool because it's almost a sneak peek into the future, if you want to like jump way ahead to the future. Interestingly enough, most of the passages that speak of the millennial kingdom are in the Old Testament. We get a great view of them in like this chapter, little Isaiah, you get Zechariah, you get a big section in Ezekiel, chapters 40 to 48. And so he begins in verse 3a, and it's like his arrival, where it says, God comes from Taman, the Holy One from Mount Paran. And so you see, it's almost like here he comes. Here comes the Lord. He's not going to stay away from you. One day he's coming back. And something interesting that I learned in reading about what Jewish thinkers thought about when you talk about the ages. They believed in two ages, really, because the Old Testament really only pictures two. The age that they were living in and the age of the Messiah. So they believed that one day the Messiah was going to come and set up the kingdom. But, of course, we know as believers and having the New Testament that Jesus did come to this earth. He offered them the kingdom, and they put him on a cross. They rejected that. They didn't want it, and they put him on a cross. But he's still coming back to set up his kingdom. And at the end of the tribulation period, they will recognize the one that they have pierced. And those that survive will be blessed and go into the millennial kingdom. So he comes from Taman. He's coming back. He's going to return. And get a picture of him returning is what the picture is here, his arrival. And then you see his appearance in 3 to 7. What does it say? He says, his glory covers the heavens. His praise fills the earth. His brightness is as the light. Rays from his hand are his. And there was a hiding of his strength. A plague went before him, and lightning went forth at his feet. He stood and measured the earth. He looked and shook the nations, and the everlasting mountains were shattered. The eternal hills bowed down. His ways are everlasting. I saw the tents of Cushan under calamity. The curtains of the land of Midian trembled. So he begins to show what happens when he is going to return. Now, this is a very general thought. The fact that God is great. He is almighty. He is powerful. And when he returns to set up his kingdom, things are going to change. He's all powerful. He's going to move mountains. He's going to set mountains down. He's going to raise a mountain up. The largest mountain will be in the land of Israel. Islands will flee away. They'll be gone. He's going to change the face of this earth. And we see that when we look at this section of Scripture. It's going to take the Lord coming and setting things straight. Because man, as you see today, he just can't do it. Everything he touches goes wrong or goes off or ends up not as good as he wanted, maybe a little bit bad, worse than they wanted. When you don't have the Lord in things, right, things usually don't go right. And the world doesn't want anything to do with the Lord Jesus Christ. And they leave him out. Well, what do you expect is going to happen when you leave the creator of the universe out of what you're doing? And that's essentially what they're doing. So what you have is you have God's appearing. And then in verses 8 through 15, you have God's actions. Okay, God's actions. And it says, did Jehovah burn against rivers, or was your anger against the rivers? Was your wrath against the sea? For you ride on horses, your chariots of salvation. Verse 9, you make your bow naked according to the oaths of the rod of your word. Selah, think on these things. You have cut through the earth with rivers. They saw you. Mountains trembled. The storms of water passed over. The deep uttered its voice and lifted up its hands on high. The sun and moon still in their dwelling. At the light of your arrows they go, in the shining of your gleaming spear. You march into the land in fury. You threshed the nations in anger. You went forth for the salvation of your people, for salvation with your anointed. You struck the head of the house of the wicked, to bear the foundation to the neck. Selah. Again. You pierced the head of his warriors with shafts. They storm out to scatter me. They rejoicing is to devour the meek in a secret place. And in verse 15, you trod the sea with your horses, the foaming of many waters. Now, when you begin to read this, it's a continuing thought to what we talked about in the last section, but it actually moves into what God is actually doing in the earth. First, he changes the face of the earth, but what is very interesting is in verse 12, where he begins to talk about you thresh nations in anger. The Lord is going to judge the nations, and how the reason why, like if you've read the book of Ezekiel, the first part of it talks about the judgment of Israel and why he had to judge Israel. And then there's a section where he judges the nations around Israel. And the reason why is because of how they treated his people, Israel. And you'll be judged for treating them badly. You'll be blessed for treating them honestly and rightly. And so he's going to thresh the nations in anger for how they treated his people and how they reacted to him and his call to come to him. And then it says, he went forth for the salvation of his people. The book of Daniel, his holy city, his people, it's the nation of Israel. It's not, there's Christians out there who believe that the church has replaced Israel. That's nonsense. Okay, read Romans 11. It's all about Israel's future and how God still has promises that he has to fulfill with the nation of Israel. So he's going to use his anointed. It says you went forth for the salvation of his people, for salvation with your anointed. Jesus Christ is going to return. They are going to recognize him, and they're going to love him and obey him and believe in him. Jesus is going to come. And I love this, the next part. Some theologians think this is like a picture of what's going to happen to the Antichrist when Jesus returns. It says you struck the head from the house of the wicked to bear the foundation to the neck. Because when Jesus returns, he judges the Antichrist and lays his body dead, done. And it's almost like a little picture. You struck the head of the house of the wicked in the tribulation period is the Antichrist. And so he's going to come and strike him dead. He was the leader of the band and the one who completely opposed Christ. And Christ is going to end him. Done. Finished. So it's interesting. And then he says, you pierce the head of his warriors with his shafts. They storm out to scatter me. Their rejoicing is to devour the meek in a secret place. It sounds to me like the Battle of Armageddon, when the nations of the world gather all their armies and the Antichrist leads them into the valley of decision, waiting for Jesus to stop him from returning. Well, that's dumb, because that's never going to happen. You can't stop the Lord from doing something, what he wants. So the Lord's going to not only judge the Antichrist, he's going to destroy the armies of the world. What I think is really cool is the millennial kingdom, one of the characteristics of the kingdom is that no more will man learn of war or be taught of battle, if you want to say it like that. No more war. 1,000 years of peace. And that's going to be phenomenal. We don't have that today. But one day when Jesus rules and reigns, no more war. No more. And so here we show God's actions again. What is he going to do when he returns? And remember, Habakkuk is praying, and the Lord is showing him now the future of the nation. They're going to get judged for sure. They're going to be moved out of their home for sure. They're going to have a whole time where they're not going to be able to rule themselves with any measure. But one day, Jesus is going to return and free them, give them the land he promised, and they're going to prosper immensely in the kingdom. So then you have Habakkuk prays for mercy, verses 1 and 2. You see the presence of God's majesty in 3 through 15. And the last thing is you see Habakkuk's peace in ministry. Tone change here with our prophet. Look at verse 16 where it says, I heard and my belly trembled, my lips quivered at the voice, rottenness entered into my bones, I trembled in myself that I might rest in the day of trouble to come up against the people. He cuts him off. So after hearing all these things, he's still nervous because he just was revealed to him this incredible time. The Lord's going to do this. He's going to act. He's going to come and he's going to conquer. And he's going to hurt the people who hurt Israel. And so he's shaken after hearing all these things. But look at the rest of the section, because that fear turns to rejoicing. And that's really the key for what we go through as people. We go through hard times. And they may seem hard at the time, and maybe sometimes we feel God is not listening, and maybe we don't see the end, the light in the tunnel, right? But God is working. God is doing. Even though we don't see, he sees the end from the beginning, as if it were right now. And so look what Habakkuk does. Though the fig tree shall not blossom, and its fruit is not on the vines, the labor of the olive fails, and the fields yield no fruit. The flock is cut off from the fold, and no herd is in the stalls. So, I mean, imagine back in that day. That means you have no produce, no nothing, no money coming in, because you have nothing to trade. You have zero. You're going to lose everything. What does he say in verse 18? Yet I will rejoice in Jehovah. I will joy in the God of my salvation. See, he directs his attention correctly. He directs it to the person who he knows can do something about the situation that he's in. There's no one else that can help. No one. Think about your life. Think about my life. God is the only person who could actually intervene and do miracles. He's the only one. Sure. You have friends, maybe you have good Christian friends, they come alongside, they pray for you, they help you, little this, little that, whatever. But it is God who works in and through that situation, that person, to minister to you and to me. I mean, where's our focus? Well, Habakkuk's focus turned correctly right to the Lord. And he says in verse 19, the Lord is my strength, and he will make my feet like a hind's feet, and he will make me walk on my high places. And then he says to the chief singer on my stringed instruments. Now, he's going to take Habakkuk from this low place to this high place. You ever seen goats like on the side of a dam? You know, like dams are like pretty straight up, a little bit of an angle. And you see goats like they got their feet perched like right on the crack between stones. It's like, how did you get up there? Are you crazy? He's going to make you absolutely secure in those high places. And you're not going to have to worry about falling, anything like that. He's got you. So you see the change in his attitude? You see that, how he kind of turns? Like Peter, Lord, if it's you, command me to walk out on the water. And Jesus said, come on out. And Peter begins to walk. And once he took his eyes off the Lord, he began to sink. We need to keep our eyes on the Lord. That's the story. Habakkuk prays. He went from crying to praising. And there are some people who think that Habakkuk was kind of in the music ministry, like he was a musician. And it's because of that last line. set this to stringed instruments, almost like the Psalms. Some of the Psalms at the end will say this is for, instruments or things like that. So, because we really don't know too much about the man Habakkuk. So that's really the whole book of Habakkuk. I really hope you enjoyed it. It's just one of the things in my heart is to go through the minor prophets because I feel they are just so neglected. And especially today, I know there are people who they preach the gospel, and we all should, and they talk about the rapture, and we should. But we need to teach the whole counsel of God, and the minor prophets are part of that. And we can learn so much from them and apply it to our lives. So Habakkuk is such a wonderful man. I felt we should start there, and we'll move on. We'll do some other ones. But I just want to thank you for coming along and keep watching, because we're going to do some other cool things. And as I learn, like the software and stuff, we're going to get better at it. So just wanted to say the Lord bless you and keep you and give you a great day. And remember, we have a blessed future in Christ. So God bless. See you next time.